Hi, welcome to Hats Off Series podcast, where we interview individuals from diverse fields who have done something hardcore. Today we have with us Sai and Priyanka, who are the founders of Coomini, which is an alternative micro school based in Mumbai. Welcome, Priyanka and Sai. So, for our audience, set the context. Where are you from? What do you guys do? And what is this micro school concept all about?
First, thank you, Raki, for having us on. Great to be here. Yes, so I'm Sai, Priyanka. So we are a couple. We run a school, Coomini, an alternative school, a small micro school in Bandra. Uh, we'll do a short history. So there's long history to this. So we were in Bangalore for, I think, about 10 years. And then the pandemic happened and we decided we wanted to be closer to grandparents, which is how we moved to Bombay. Started looking for schools, didn't find any. And then that's when we decided to uh, set up Coomini because, yeah, we just didn't find anything. So that's the really short version of the story. Uh, in terms of background, so I've been.
One sec. You said you didn't find anything. So if you can decode that, like what are you looking for?
So we obviously we that was our first experience with schooling with our child. So she was 5 years old during the pandemic. Schooling went online. She was going to a lovely school in Bangalore, but when it went online, because that was a compulsion, we got to see it up close. Okay, what's actually happening with schools? What is learning? And there was so and at the same time I was working on a book. A little bit of background. So I'm a neuroscientist, an engineer turned a neuroscientist. And I was working on a book at that exact same time on learning and the mind and thinking. So I was doing this very theoretical deep dive into the mind and what learning is. And here we were seeing the practical version of that, which is kids learning. And it looked very flawed. The idea that kids have to sit around a screen and listen to someone through that screen, mediated to a screen, sit quietly, and that happened to be learning during the pandemic. So that was the trigger for saying, hey, this got to be something better. When we started looking very seriously at what is education supposed to be, what is learning supposed to be, and then the move to Bombay happened. And when I say we didn't find a school, so we were looking for a school where learning was not reduced to instead of staring at screens, staring at a teacher while a teacher does all the talking. And there are some good schools, but for us, it meant that it had to be a good school, by which meant something that was not the usual conventional mode of learning, which is teacher talks, everyone listens. That plus something close enough so kids are not spending 2 hours every day in their commute, which would be a killer.
So Sai, Priyanka, you guys went to a mainstream school?
Yeah. We did, yes.
And you all were looking out for something which is not typical mainstream.
So not me particularly. I went to mainstream school, so I thought I turned out fine. Kids will turn out fine. We all turned out fine. So I belong to that stream of thought. Sai, because of his background in neuroscience, since her daughter was little, was very clear that she does not need to go to mainstream school because that's not how learning happens. Up until that our daughter was actually of school going age, we really never had a serious conversation about school, what do we do, etc. So even in Bangalore, when our kid went to the lovely school in Bangalore, it was just because, she happened to be our neighbor, and then we was like, okay, this sounds good enough. Childcare is need of the hour. We'll send our kid to schools. And when we moved to Bombay, we realized, okay, now what do we do? So the not looking at mainstream school was primarily him. And I, to this day, leave it up to him to figure out. I'm hoping that he's making the right choices.
He's the brainchild.
He is the brainchild. But honestly, after the last 3 years, I realized how true that actually is. So while the anxieties still continue to exist, even to some extent with me right now, to see every day kids thriving in a non-mainstream school is really fun and fantastic to see.
So it's interesting. You've authored a book. You've done your PhD in neuroscience, and somewhere based on your experience, you have figured it out that okay, learning is not the way it's happening in mainstream school. And as you rightly said, that we need to first understand what is a mainstream school versus what is an alternative school. So, Priyanka, Sai, throw some light on, what is an alternative school versus a mainstream school.
So mainstream is what everyone has been doing, everyone's still doing. Right? We all went to mainstream school. And
Which follows like a standardized curriculum, which is maybe a state board school or an IGCSE school or an IB school, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So those are all mainstream schools.
Accredited part of,
Absolutely.
And what makes mainstream schools mainstream is there's a philosophy implicit in that. And the idea there is that uh, learning can be standardized, that we can actually put kids into different buckets, segregate them by a certain age, uh, and then fill their brains with certain things. That's right. And we use different terms for this. We have curriculum, we have tests and all of that, but at the core of it, right, there is this idea, this philosophy that, oh, okay, this is what learning is. And a mainstream school is anything that either knowingly or unknowingly follows that philosophy.
And who decides that this is a learning that needs to be imparted to a 4-year-old, to 5-year-old, to 6-year-old? Who decides that?
So we have these curriculum boards, we have that have stated goals for what needs to be followed.
The learning goals outline, and that's how the schools are designing the learning experiences for the kids. All right.
And so I do want to add to this. So there are what we call alternative schools, which do not adhere to either a philosophy, the implicit philosophy, or follow a certain curriculum. And they're alternative simply because they've rejected a certain conventional method. And these have existed for a long time. So one thing we should clear up is that, we're not the first ones to suddenly wake up and say, oh, wow, so, the world has to change how it's doing.
So then what is a micro school?
So micro school, we are a micro school. Coomini is a micro school. It's a micro school for two reasons. One is that we're in Bombay and spaces that are premium. The second is that it's a definition that we have come to appreciate and love. Is a micro school is one where everyone knows everyone else. So it's not a particular number that makes it a micro school. So as the name indicates, it's small. But why should it be small? Right? For us, what makes the most sense, and we see that every day, is that it's a school where it's small enough that everyone, that includes the kids, the facilitators, support staff, everyone knows, and parents knows each other meaningfully well.
So coming back to the community space, so how do you guys create this space? How is it being developed?
So one important way is exactly what you're talking about, the connection between the home and family. So what you mentioned about, like, there's a lot of time that kids spend at home, and there's actually a ton that a parent knows about their children, their learning styles, what they're interested in, their passions, their interests, which can actually be used very purposefully in school from like the education and learning perspective, which is exactly the bridge that in a micro school like Coomini that we try to sort of bridge. Use parents as so we think that there are three important pieces in this piece: the parents, the facilitators, and the child. So it's not that the kid goes to school and learning happens only in the four walls of school. Learning also happens for a significant portion at home. So getting the parents to sort of weigh in on the educational journey, us giving us feedback, listening to their feedback, and then collaboratively coming up with the best sort of educational journey for the kid is an important aspect of how we sort of...
And are the parents cooperative enough, or do they say we don't have time?
No, absolutely. I feel like the parents who've subscribed said, okay, like willing to sort of sign up their kid to a micro school and an alternative system like ours, have sort of signed up for the whole hog and very collaborative in...
I think that's something which is insightful, because the other day I was having a conversation with a group of educators, and we all thought that, okay, moving forward, YouTube is the future of education. But I feel that it's the parent who is the future of education, because it's the parent, like, for example, if you see a child who is a sports person, you feel that, oh wow, your school has trained you well. Whereas the child is like, no, the school did nothing. It's my parent who took me from here to Pune every weekend and, coached and gave that time. So I think it's a parent who is the curator for the child. And if parents can be empowered in the right manner, then a lot of it can change in education. Because I believe that, if you got to change if we need to see a change in education, there has to be a mindset shift. And that is something where we all are struggling with, because and also one reason why we are struggling is because we are in the same system and we are fighting with the same system. So would it be correct to say that alternative schools do not belong to that system, and hence they have the power to enable, empower, and change the mindset? Would it be correct to say that?
You mentioned adolescence on Netflix, and that's a great example. We've seen so many parents talk about it. One, it's a very interesting show, wonderfully shot. But the conversations are often about, oh wow, we're finally seeing what we've seen glimpses of, which is kids have their own world, especially now, this digital world that they're a part of. And there've been a lot of fingers pointed saying that, oh, the culprit is this wild west of the online world where we don't know what's happening. What's been very interesting for us is that no one has actually pointed out the school as a culprit. If you look at the very and in fact, the series does a great job of showing how the school's a culprit, but it's in the background. It's oppressive. It's right.
Yeah.
But school is not. So no one's really questioned the school and the way the system operates. Right. There's this drill that kids are to follow. There's a bell, and they're shepherded into another room. The idea that they have to be sheltered. Right. That this school is sheltering them, and supposedly with good intentions. Right. So that they can learn. And that has a great connection, coming back to what we said about community and connection. You cannot shelter kids and try to sever the connection to the real world and somehow expect them to then become responsible adults because, you're sitting them in a classroom and telling them this is what you need to do. Now we have these whole names for SEL. The idea that somehow kids who are these amazing creatures who can understand how to navigate this chaotic world socially, emotionally, cognitively, we're saying, oh, let's trap them in a classroom. Let's then give them SEL learning, right? So alternative schooling, I think, recognizes that there's something really, really wrong with this.
What's SE?
SEL is, social emotional learning. And this is, for me, this is just amazing, right? That is happening every second of the day for a child.
You say that scenarios are being created within the classroom and then
very artificial scenarios where they have...
Hence the social motion.
Right. Whereas the fact is, if you literally let them out into the world and interact with people of different ages, social learning happens, right? But we pathologize it and give it a label and then try to find deficiencies in that. So what alternative schooling does, I think, it says there's something fundamentally wrong with that, right? Let's try to first understand how kids are learning, right? And this is if they're allowed to be with their own devices, not digital devices, their own minds, free to explore, free to connect with kids and adults of different ages. That's not happening in school. So in alternative schools, of course, some of them may still have a different mindset, but most, I think, alternative schools which came to be because they questioned the system in place, understand that these connections and communication have to be nourished. And I think that's a big part of it. In fact, it's not the curriculum, it's not any particular class. It's letting kids be and having the freedom and agency to explore the world and not really constrain that world. That's what's...
So it's beautiful because, when we talk about the 21st century skills, and one of the topmost skills that is responsible for raising a brilliant or a successful child, as per the book, How to Raise Brilliant Kids by Miss Kathy. And she points out that the topmost skill is the ability to get along with others. And that was something which kind of blew my mind. And I was like, wow, we never really thought that this is a skill to get along with others. But then in the era that we are in, we are completely being ruined by the digital world because every answer, we are dependent on our gadgets. With the AI tools that are coming up, I mean, of course, it's wonderful the way you use it. It can help you, it can boost your productivity, no doubt. But the way our problems are being solved, like initially I would remember I would go to a mentor, I would sit down, I would talk, I would probably do some research, I would probably read some articles, I would visit a library. But today no longer are those days are gone, where you don't want to talk and you just pick up an AI tool to get your doubts answered. So how is this ability being nurtured, for that matter, in schools or alternative schools, of getting along?
The simple answer to that is play. The best way for kids and even adults to get along is to simply just play together. You send them downstairs and they play hide and seek. They have to make rules. They have to negotiate with each other. They realize if they take a toy from somebody else, it's not going to work out. It's something as simple and beautiful as play. And genuinely, that's all that kids truly should have more of in their lives, which is just play and free play and not necessarily anything to do. Absolutely.
Wow. So how does play happen at Coomini, if you were to describe it?
So bulk of our time is dedicated to free play and it is unstructured play.
So you mean to say like the kids are set?
So there is the environment, they have each other, they have...
Who creates this now?
So the school basically creates this environment by creating time for it. So we have, like, in a day of 7 hours, we have about 2 and 3 hours of guided, structured activities for the older kids. The rest of the time is play. And the things that they're able to do during that time is simply just mind-boggling. They can create
7 hours is just 3 hours of
structured and guided, non-forced. I mean, even for the 3 hours, if there is some compelling reason that they don't want to be part of that time, they have absolute liberty to do that, as long as.
So how do you guys finish your curriculum? I mean, this is like a typical parent question.
So that is what makes this so interesting, right? So we have to then start asking questions, and this is what we're trying to articulate. When we're trying to set up a school, or when we're trying to set up alternative learning, we can't just reject something and then say, okay, let's pick up this new philosophy, a new dogma. There's some questions to answer. And for us, it is why, what, when, how, where we learn and where we teach. And so then we have to start asking questions. Okay, so who said the curriculum is important? That's question one, right? Second is, who said that the curriculum has to be administered in these drip by drip doses where a kid has to do certain things by the end of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. It's just received wisdom. But if you look at the science of learning, right, actually we are capable of nonlinear learning, right? And kids are even more so.
So what's nonlinear?
So nonlinear learning is the idea that it can look like from the outside that no learning has happened for a long time, could be months, could be years, and that suddenly you see learning happen overnight.
Could you give us an example, man?
Yeah. So, for instance, we've seen this in person in Coomini, where one kid, very bright, excel at many things, was simply unable to learn to read. And this was, I think, 2-3 years back. He was 7, and this was like a real struggle to even understand and decode 3-letter words. And in a typical school, in the typical conventional sense, there would be labels. Parade of labels would be pathologizing it and all sorts of things. Intervention. We need an intervention. So we didn't go that far. We did have our anxiety, saying that, hey, why is this happening? And this is where we said, you know what? Instead of jumping to answers, what we need to do is ask questions, right? First, what's happening here? Is this normal? How does learning typically unfold? And then when we looked at the research, we see that, you know what, and especially, and both research and empirical evidence, we looked at how other schools have done this. And here's where having people who have done this before us has been a great help for us. So Sudbury schools have been around for 60, 70 years, Summerhill in the UK. And there's a wonderful book by the founder of Sudbury, I think it's called Free to Learn, by Daniel Greenberg, where he actually talks about this, right? We've seen this repeatedly in our school. Kids don't need to be taught how to read. They pick it up, sometimes as early as 3, sometimes as late as 10.
The kids don't need to be taught how to read.
Right. And they just pick it up.
Defies the principle of a play school.
Absolutely. It absolutely defies every convention we know. And we read this, and the funny thing is, we read this when we were in the throes of starting it up, and we're like, okay, yeah, but that's probably a little too radical for us.
On age of 6, and no matter how many other languages you feed into the child, and whatever you make the child do, the child is going to absorb. Right. Here we are trying to decode. Right. Okay, we don't need to really teach.
Right, exactly, and teach in a particular way. Of course, we can help them. So that's not right. We can help them when they're looking at words, and help them how to decode. There's a science for that. But the fact that we don't have to sit them down, drill them, right, which completely takes the joy out of it. That was the empirical evidence. Exactly. So the way we do these drills as well, right, completely leached of meaning, and say, okay, forget the joys of reading. All you care about is the phonics for these letters. Don't do it that way, right? But also that was the empirical evidence, and the science that, you know what, kids actually, no matter what kind of learning you're looking at, there's a lot of invisible learning happening, right? Connections are being formed inside the brain. With this particular case, there's something called the working memory, phonological working memory, that has to develop. We don't look for that. We're simply looking for visible evidence. Is the kid able to learn to, put these 3-letter sounds together and create a word? So we're like, and it says, okay, for some kids that visible learning happens later, because all these things have to happen early, and in the case of some kids, phonological working memory is developing a little later than others. So here, what we did after asking these questions and then stepping back was just wait and see. And it turns out that that's all you need to do. And sure enough, 1 year down the line, the kid was just reading graphic novels on their own, enjoying them, devouring books. And we see that. And for us, what is particularly gratifying, what gives us a lot of courage and belief in what we're doing is that when we started off, it was very theoretical, right? So the books are saying this, the latest research is saying this, but now we're seeing that in action.
Yeah.
And coming back to the where we started, so that is what learning is nonlinear means, right? When saying that it happens in fits and starts, there's no drip by drip process that's required. You just expose them to the world, let them get all this.
Say expose, you provide the right environment.
Yes, which is both
the school is responsible also for providing.
Partially, right? So there is the so what we've understood is that we don't want to be too overbearing as well. We don't want to create this completely sanitized environment. So of course, kids are living their lives in their real world. Even here, school for us is something that approaches home to a large part. But what we do beyond that is give them these invitations to explore the world, right? So we have thoughtfully curated things. Again, not being too overbearing in what we give them. And that is essentially to provide them guidance, provide them scaffolding for what they can learn. Simple, concrete example, right? What can we provide? What do we provide? Tons of books. So we have a very decent library. They're allowed to go there, pick up a book, sit whenever.
It's very cozy, I must say.
Yeah.
It's very inviting for the learner. Yeah.
And something as simple as that, right? Just, and of course, regular schools will have libraries as well, but then there are strict times as to when you enter them, when you're allowed to spend time there. So it could be something as simple as that when we say, okay, so how do we create a thoughtful environment where learning can be unhindered?
So when I visited your school, I realized that all the kids are studying together. There is no bifurcation of grades, like no drip by drip, as you said, information. So how does that happen? Because as a parent, coming from the space, coming from the background of education, of course, I understand that it's one of the best ways to do it. But as a parent, a lay parent, if the lay parent were to see this kind of scenario, wouldn't they be baffled by this thought that how can you put my 6 or 8-year-old child with a 3-year-old child in the same space? And how are you then going to cater to their curiosity and their learning goals? How are you going to make that?
So for the bulk of the day, which is minus the 3 hours, we are in a completely pure mixed age environment where the 3-year-old and the 9-year-old will eat lunch together, will play together, will read together. And the 9-year-old will read to the 3-year-old, which is just the beautiful aspects to watch.
Connection.
And it's truly amazing to watch. And then the 3-year-old wants to become like the 9-year-old and try to teach themselves to read, etc. But during the 3 hours of the guided activities that we provide, it is per age, not necessarily standardized grades, but it's more developmental level. So we offer, for example, a literacy class, which would be catered to a set of students who are just beginning to learn to read. The literacy class for the older kids is for kids who are already learned to read, and it's expanding their horizons there. So during the guided sessions, we do break up into age appropriate cohorts. So they have separate sessions that happen through the day. So the guided mindful facilitation that we do is according to their age and developmental level. So we're not necessarily sticking to age necessarily. It's more as to where they are at. Yes.
They are at and meeting them and like that. So again, coming down to the fundamental questions. So do you all have a curriculum or is it child-based?
So it's both. So these are two perspectives that we have to balance. There's a child-centric one and there's a curriculum-centric one. And the reason we need a curriculum-centric one is we know that kids eventually, when it's grade 8 or grade 10, have to take those exams. And
absolutely, because I think education is pretty much milestone based.
Right.
That you got to clear your 8th, you got to clear your 10th, you got to clear your 12th, and that's about it. And still be clueless as to after clearing those exactly what next.
So we do have these milestones, these hurdles that they have to jump, and we're aware that that's what the real world needs right now. But that's in grade 8 or grade 10, and we don't need to then have that anxiety percolate all the way down to grade 3 and say this is what we have to start preparing now. So we keep the curriculum in mind. We broadly map to the IGCSE levels and Common Core. And what's interesting, by the way, is that all these curriculum are very well intentioned, very well thought through. Obviously, there are experts working on this, but what happens is what's called teaching to test, right? The moment you give a curriculum, you set a target, you put a lot of anxiety on teachers and parents, and then all the good intentions go to the window. You try to teach them exactly what's coming on the test without the idea of broader learning. So we try to avoid that. We have a map, we have a landscape, and then we use this metaphor that we try to be very aware of, is that learning is exploration. So we can have, that does not mean that you go off, run into the wild. You can still have a map, but that map should not constrain you and say that you have to be on this trail alone. It should help you figure out where you are. And then we use that to reflect on, okay, so this is how this child is doing. And we understand that, okay, so, if you look at math, for instance, right? So there are some 32 concepts you have to cover. And we are aware that, okay, some kids are maybe well ahead on the
throughout or per year?
Up to, so if you look at the primary years, right? So that would be grade 1 to grade 4 or 5. So you have 32 concepts, so broken down. So we are very well aware of that.
So the learning goals are mapped.
Right. So, but that does not mean that then they immediately, crop up as things that have to be done. Then where the curriculum then guides us is in coming up with activities, right? These guided activities that we do. And a phrase that we really love and which really fits well with what we're doing with mixed age groups is what we call low floor, high ceiling activities. So because we have firstly, there's a myth that, okay, if you put 6-year-olds in a class, they're all at the same level or roughly at the same level. That's not true. They're at very, very, very different levels. So even in regular school, their levels are different. And what happens as a result of this is that kids who are far ahead in something are bored. They're getting distracted. Kids who are not there yet are struggling, are developing phobias. All of this happening in a regular classroom. So here we do have development levels, but it's very hard in practice to say we are a small group, right? So we have 26 students. Each cohort is about 7 to 10, at most 10 kids. We don't have 10 yet. Even within that group, in practice, what we find is that they're very, very different.
Absolutely. And that comes down to the question that, okay, you need great facilitators for the same. So, because without the guidance of the facilitator, the entire group would go for a toss. They would go haywire and all the learning goals would be put out the window. So how do you address this issue of, bringing in the right kind of facilitators? I mean, that's a question that just came up, but you can park it and answer it later as well.
Yes. So I think it's a very important question. And here too, there's a lot of unlearning that's required. So first knee-jerk reaction would be, well, they need to have expertise in something, right? But no one.
Absolutely.
But then if you think about it, look at parenting, right? No one's asking us for a certificate before we become parents. The expectation, exactly. The expectation is that we have the baseline competency and then we'll pick it up and everything. And we see that's really what is required, right? We look for baseline competence.
Love that analogy that, okay, parenting doesn't require license and why should teaching require license?
So because again, learning is life. That's another thing we'll get to later. But they all have undergraduate degrees. When we are, I think, interviewing them, we look for that they have that baseline competence, the very visible competence that, okay, they're intelligent, they're asking questions, they can, which is important for us because facilitation for us is not about providing ready-made answers.
Okay.
It's about saying these are the questions to answer. I may not know them yet, but I will at least be able to learn along, provide those answers, learn either one day, 1 week ahead, have those ready. And then even then doesn't mean that you have every answer ready for a question that a kid might ask, right? The humility to say, you know what, I don't know this. Let's learn together. That's part of the philosophy as well. So our educators we don't look for particular degrees. We look for that baseline competence and a love for kids, which is a hugely important part of that, right? And I think we've not made this point till now, but it needs to be made that this is not a theoretical exercise. We could have all these ideas about education and all of that. All of them go out of the window if the people who are actually facilitating this, educating the day in, day out, do not have love for kids and caring for kids as a foundation for everything.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two ingredients.
And when I was reading your hiring, the Google form that you give out for teachers who are interested to be hired, I think one of the questions that you ask is, are you willing to change diapers? And that was something hilarious because I felt, why would you ask this question? What is the notion? What do you want to know?
It's the willingness, to actually to let the fact that you don't look at no hierarchy is one aspect of it. And the fact is it's a part of human life and nature and child care. And we don't have.
That's such a fundamental question because, of course, when I was going through your form, it's quite an elaborate form. But those questions itself, speak about the philosophy of the school. that it's learning by questioning. And that's where you are actually incorporating it right through your hiring process.
Yes.
And there were a few other questions, but this one really caught my eye. And I felt that, wow, I've never seen anybody putting down this question and letting the person know that, okay, I need to be answerable to this question.
And it's been a great filter. I mean, for all the facilitators who've answered yes or I'm okay with it, are the ones who actually worked out great for us.
Those are the ones who are willing to unlearn, who are willing to go beyond and do what is required at that moment. Wow, that's lovely.
We spoke about how we don't ask for a degree for a certificate for parenting, but if there's one question we should ask, I think it is this: are you willing to change your title? Because I think everyone realizes you have to do that, but and yeah, so that's the question that works for us. And on paper, someone can have all the right answers, but if that one question is not answered, we have seen in practice, right? So when we speak to them, we realize that okay, the theoretical ideas about learning are there, but that's not enough. You need the willingness to get down with the kids, be part of the chaos and the messiness, embrace that, and of course change.
Do you guys do that? Do you all get down with the kids and play around with them and
wash buns?
Coming back to you, Sai, I mean, well, the intention of the alternative school is to provide hands-on learning, to be creative, innovative. On one end of the spectrum, it looks like a great idea. I mean, I would love to put my kids into an alternative setup, but on the other end, there's the fear that, okay, what if certain goals are compromised, or, my child is not ready for the competitive world, because we all seem to be talking about the competitive exams, the competitive world that we are faced with until grade 10 gets done away with. And it's also the fear of unknown and fear of missing out as well. That, okay, other parents are doing this and I'm not doing this. So is it okay? Is it the right thing to do? So why we are in this, orbit, oscillating and trying to figure out that, okay, whether this is good or that is good as parents. On the other end, we see schools which are incorporating AI, which are having more United Nations debates, sending their students out for international conferences, debate conferences. So how do we, as a parent, how do we weigh these two worlds? I mean, as a parent, am I going to be okay with my child going to an alternative school and not being exposed to the real learning that's happening in those topmost schools? Or should I actually opt for those schools and forget about, learning by senses, learning by doing, and, all the skills that we just spoke about? Like, as a parent, what would be, I mean, there's no right on, but as a parent who's in a dilemma, what would be the step for that parent?
I think one of our prospective parents put it a great way, and so we asked them to fill out a form, and the question was, does alternative learning mean alternative careers? And I think that was a great question, and we didn't realize that even some of our parents in the Coomini community think that, oh, you know what, this is great. We do not want our kids to go to a regular school, and as a result, they might miss out on some opportunity. But we don't look at it that way. For us, if we're doing this right, alternative learning absolutely does enable them for competitive careers as well in a very conventional pathways. It's just that we're saying that the base, the way they put down the foundation is different. A case in point, if you look at homeschoolers if you look at all the athletes or musicians in India, because of what they have to do, they often are homeschooled, right? So on the one hand, you have these absolutely world-class musicians, athletes who are clearly very competitive. They're at the top of their fields, right? But they're homeschooled. And that somehow resulted in them losing their competitive edge? I wouldn't say so. In fact, it's, sending them to a school where they're sheltered, I don't think really somehow enhances some competitive edge. Yeah, of course, you're in a rat race and that has its own toxic side effects. But I think there's healthy competition, right? And I think to be human is to understand how to balance cooperation and competition. That's part of that. We are naturally cooperative. We are naturally competitive. That's part of everyone. And it's understanding how to healthily do that. In fact, I think Priyanka can talk about that. One of the things we find is that the kids in our school are super competitive. Right, one of the things they thrive on is coming up with games where they can try and beat each other, but they do it in a healthy way, right? So there is that competitive spirit, and it's I think a question of figuring out how to channel this into these into these exams and tests when required. It doesn't mean that we sacrifice everything and then say, okay, right, so here's the rat race. That could happen 10 years later, the final race. But to prepare you, we now have to do these mock rat races every year. I don't think
so. They should know what has been pulled upon are the skills that are required to face those competitive exams. And that is what is being nurtured rather than creating those mock-like situations and getting them through the stress of facing them 10 years down the line. So that is where I feel the hidden curriculum is something which plays a very, very important role, where the hidden curriculum, because every school has its own hidden curriculum, and the hidden curriculum could actually act in a negative way as well. And at the same time, it could nurture the child's abilities in ways that, even parents wouldn't be able to notice it. So trying to understand, for our audience as well. So there's no battle between, mainstream school and alternative schools. I think it's mostly dependent on what kind of child you have. I mean, if your child is someone who is, an explorer by nature, who loves nature, and and you're okay with the child going at his or her own
That's an important
pace.
one as well.
So as a parent,
also, your own value system and your own belief. And so there is no one size fits all. And we're absolutely saying that mainstream schooling works great for certain kids and has worked great. So we're just providing an alternative as an option to people and families and kids and parents who are seeking something that is not conventionally available. So and the answer to that is yes, you can do that if you have the wherewithal, the risk-taking appetite, and so it's again just a perspective that parents would have, which sort of would probably move them more towards alternative schools like us.
But I think this conversation is very insightful, and the whole idea of mainstreaming, alternative schools, hidden curriculum, the competency skills that we are looking at in building in our learners. I think what matters at the bottom is the intention. After having all these conversations about micro schools, alternative schools, curriculums, hidden curriculums, I think it's time for some fun. Right? So I'm going to be putting out a statement up, and you got to interpret it and give me an answer. Whoever wants to go first. What does discipline mean to you?
Discipline, I think, is a combination to me of accountability, of realizing that you are responsible for your actions and realizing that it has repercussions and other people are affected by your actions. And it also has a connotation of hard work to me, that if you want to get good at something, you have to stick at it, stick with it, and focus and get up when you have to get up and eat what you have to eat and do the thing for.
Okay. You want to give that a shot?
To add to that, I think it's the ability to understand that what you want in the long term and what you want in the short term may not necessarily agree with each other. And it's the ability to say that if I want to do this in the longer term, 3 months, 1 year from now, whether it's to crack some exam, to get healthier, it needs the ability to then recognize that what you want in the short term could be counterproductive.
So it's basically putting up, like, if I'm studying and my friend calls me, let's go for a movie, I should say no and I should focus on studying.
Or at least understand that this is the trade-off here.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Define success.
Success is finding, I think, happiness, meaning, and purpose. There's a Japanese concept of ikigai. Yeah. For me, that is success.
Yeah.
Where everything resonates with each other and synchronized.
Same. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. I think we had some good thinking and some safe answers that were given. But nonetheless, I think when it comes to giving a hamper, I think go with Priyanka. She was more expressive and she was able to throw some light. Thank you so much. We had an interesting conversation with Sai and Priyanka on decoding alternative schools, understanding how mainstream schools function, the curriculum goals, how learning happens, and no matter what, the intentions is what matters. And whether it's an alternative school or whether it's a mainstream school, parents are an important and equal stakeholder. And I feel that parents shouldn't be taking schools so seriously, and they shouldn't be getting bogged down and getting anxious or getting into the dogma of following what the norm is, but rather be an active participant, play with their kids, have fun with their kids, because learning is not about giving your child away to a school. And learning is all about nurturing the child together with the school and creating those learning spaces which your child would be interested in. And I think that's a space that parents and schools need to be creating for our future learners. And I think we've got enough takeaways from today's podcast as to, how we as parents can be responsible for the same. And ultimately, it's not a fight between mainstream and alternative. I would not say it's a fight, but it's an individual decision that a parent needs to take. If you're a teacher, whether you're teaching in an alternative school or a mainstream school, there's the same amount of zest, that's the same amount of passion, that's the same amount of commitment and connection that's required. So I don't see this versus that, but what I see is that, if today I walk into a hotel and, if my favorite cuisine is Italian, I'm just going to walk into an Italian restaurant as compared to an UDP restaurant. But that doesn't make the UDP restaurant better or worse than the Italian restaurant. So that's something that I would like to conclude with. So thank you so much for showing up today on our podcast. And if you would like to visit Coomini, you can definitely get in touch with the founders. We will be leaving the link of the school in the description. So you can click on the link and you can get in touch with the founders and you can visit the school and see for yourself how learning happens in alternative schools. So this is Rafi Chabria signing off. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.